What's going on, everyone? Today is November 13th of 2023, and welcome back to this, the 64th edition of the Super Stream. You may notice a unique golden hue to the thumbnail today. Well, that's simply because my birthday is June 4th, 6-4, and if you're one of the old schoolers here on YouTube, you may even remember that my original YouTube channel was Gematria 64. Now it's 85 as my first channel was deleted, so I had to go with my birth year, but here we are. So what are we going to talk about in today's Super Stream? We should have a little bit over an hour of content, and depending on how quickly we go through this, I might talk about another story or two. But what we're going to talk about in this video is how the night theme, this narrative that I've been discussing in my last two Super Streams, 62 and 63, has now continued into this week. And we're going to focus on this at the start when we talk about the deaths of two former NFL players, Matt Ulrich, a former Indianapolis Colts player, who was a winner of Super Bowl 41, and now Ulrich has died at the age of 41. We'll also take a look at former Raider DJ Hayden, who was reported to have been killed in a car crash yesterday. Actually, this was back on November 11th, 2 days ago at the age of 33. Also, we'll revisit the Dick Butkus case, as his cause of death was now revealed. In the sport of baseball, Brewers manager Craig Counsell made a surprising leap to Chicago, traveling down I-94. He'll now be coaching the Brewers' rivals, the Cubs. And to cap things off, we'll be talking about the death of actor Johnny Ruffo, an Australian actor who starred on the series Home and Away, a soap opera. And we'll talk about how his death maybe ties into this night riddle as well. So to start things off, just to kind of refresh on where we are with this night riddle. This all began on October 28th, when former Friends actor Matthew Perry passed away. And in the months leading up to his death, Perry was referring to himself as Matman on Instagram. And this is, of course, a reference to Batman. One of his last shots even had the moon high up in the air, very similar to a bat signal. And this was something he did for a while. Well, one of the arch villains of Batman is the Penguin, and perhaps one of the best known villains from the series. On the same day that Matthew Perry died, October 28th, a former player for the Pittsburgh Penguins of the NHL was killed in a tragic on-ice accident in England in a game for Nottingham against the Sheffield Steelers. Now, what was so interesting about this is that an ice skate, which is the object that cut his throat, leading to his tragic death, ice skates are made of steel. And in this game, Adam Johnson and his team were playing the Sheffield Steelers over there across the pond in England. Well, he played his NHL hockey in Pittsburgh for the Penguins. And Pittsburgh is the same city in the NFL where we get the Steelers. Now, in my video on Adam Johnson, Superstream 62, I talked a lot about the number 666. And just a few days after the death of Adam Johnson, the Pittsburgh Steelers won their 666th game in franchise history. Now, the number 666 is something we'll talk about in this video a little bit, as we do in most videos. October 28th is a date that falls 666 days after the previous New Year's Day. And this came up again just yesterday. The Pittsburgh Steelers played the Green Bay Packers, and this game was a rematch of Super Bowl 45 played back in February of 2011. Well, this rematch with the Packers took place exactly 666 weeks later. And this was the game that the Steelers entered with 666 franchise victories. In the language of Gematria, something called Sumerian, which is the alphabetic order times 6. Of course, Gematria, an ancient number lettering system. And this is what we focus on this channel, as we view the world through the lens of mysticism. The fact that we live in this synchronistic, almost computer-like realm that many mistake as base reality. But those who have an eye for mysticism in the Kabbalah certainly see that there's more going on in this world. So in reverse Sumerian, which is the reverse order times 6, both Batman and penguins have gematria of 666. Now, last year, there was a film called The Batman released in March of 2022, and it featured both Batman and the villain, the Penguin. Now, in the reverse alphabetic order, both Batman and penguins have gematria of 111. Now, the 111th prime number, divisible only by 1 in itself, is 607. Well, think about the date November 1st, written 11/1. November 1st was 607 days after the release of The Batman, featuring Robert Pattinson. And on that date, November 1st, Bobby Knight, the longtime coach of the Indiana Hoosiers, the winningest coach in basketball history at the college level when he retired, passed away at the age of 83. And the number 67, which is represented by this 607 here, was relevant to Bob Knight, as I explained in my decode in my last video. Bobby Knight, born on the date leaving 67 days in the year. He retired at age 67, and his final game even had 67 points scored in it. And this is all, of course, relevant because Batman is known as the Dark Knight. And here we have the death of Bobby Knight connected to the film The Batman. So he was the longtime coach of the Indiana Hoosiers for almost 3 decades. That's where he spent most of his career. And while he was coaching there, the film Hoosiers was released. Now, Indiana is the state where college or high school basketball is probably the biggest in America. Now, for the film Hoosiers, the home games were filmed in a city called Knightstown, Indiana. And Knightstown is located in Wayne Township. And Batman, the Dark Knight, has a real name of Bruce Wayne. And this ties back to Matthew Perry as well. Perry was on Friends, while an actor named Wayne Knight was on Seinfeld on NBC, the same network. So here we have this strong connection with The Dark Knight and Knights. Well, in The Dark Knight from 2008, the Joker was portrayed by Heath Ledger. And Heath Ledger famously died about 6 months before the release of The Dark Knight. Well, another movie that Heath Ledger starred in was 2001's A Knight's Tale. So here we have another connection with Heath Ledger and Knights. Now, in this film, A Knight's Tale, Heath Ledger plays a character who calls himself Ulrich von Liechtenstein. As we see here on the Wikipedia page, Ulrich von Liechtenstein, if I can find it. And the reason he calls himself this is because Ulrich von Liechtenstein is a medieval author who was responsible for promulgating knighthood culture in text and literature at the time, kind of putting a lot of the customs of knighthood into text. So he's very famous for that. Now, this brings us to the death of former Colts lineman Matt Ulrich, and we'll get into this in a little bit here. But first, what I want to touch on is how the film A Knight's Tale actually gets its name from The Knight's Tales. And The Knight's Tales was a book written by Geoffrey Chaucer. And I've talked about the Knight's Tales before, as this belonged to a larger collection of stories called The Canterbury Tales. Now, back in 2021, I made a video on my channel about this. And this all had to do with a shooting at Canterbury Circle in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So this was streamed 2 years ago. And again, this shooting was at Canterbury Circle. Now, the mayor of Colorado Springs at the time was John Suthers. And this stood out because there was also a shooting at a place called Sutherland Springs. We had the Sutherland Springs church shooting. So these are connected through the name Suthers, Sutherland Spring, John Suthers, and Springs, Colorado Springs, Sutherland Springs, right? So we have the death of this guy, Matt Ulrich. And if you're familiar with the name Ulrich, for me personally, it reminded me of Lars Ulrich. Now, I grew up a huge Metallica fan. And this is the Danish drummer of the band Metallica. Well, earlier this year, Metallica released its first album in 7 years, called 72 Seasons. And I want you to think about this in relation to the death of Matt Ulrich, because this is connected to the shooting at Sutherland Springs, which was connected to the Colorado Springs shooting. And spring is one of 4 seasons. So, we're also going to talk about the death of DJ Hayden, as DJ Hayden, or the name Hayden, traces us to another famous Dark Knight. While Batman is called the Dark Knight, Darth Vader was a Jedi Knight who turned to the dark side. And Darth Vader was played by an actor named Hayden Christensen. So this will lead us into the death of DJ Hayden as we move along here today. All right, so forgive me here while I get my bearings. My live stream artistry is not yet perfected. So let's talk about this in the death of Matt Ulrich. Now, what I pointed out, A Knight's Tale earlier, this film that Heath Ledger starred in, this comes from the Canterbury Tales, which was written by Geoffrey Chaucer. Now, Geoffrey Chaucer he passed away on October 25th of the year 1400, whereas Bob Knight was born on October 25th. And just to reiterate, Geoffrey Chaucer wrote the book that led to The Knight's Tale. In Gematria, using the standard cipher, this cipher, most identical to ancient Hebrew Gematria, Greek isopsephy, the letters are numbered 0 through 9, 10 through 90, and 100 through 900. And this is very similar to the Latin method, which is structured identically, but uses the alphabetic order based on the Latin alphabet instead. And these two ciphers are definitely very significant to the study. Now, in standard, A Knight's Tale sums to 631, which is the 115th prime number, divisible by only 1 and itself. The name Bobby Knight has gematria of 115. And the movie A Knight's Tale is about a jousting tournament. Jousting also equals 115 in ordinal. The movie A Knight's Tale was released on the 11th of May, the date written 115. In Gematria, the word killing has double values, both in reverse and Latin, of 115. Former Colts lineman Matt Ulrich died on November 5th, 11/5. 11/5 was also the date of the Sutherland Springs shooting back in 2017. And think about the name Lars Ulrich, the drummer from Metallica, who just recently released this new album, 72 Seasons. Spring, one of the 4 seasons. The name Lars Ulrich sums to 511 in Gematria. And if you measure from the Sutherland Springs shooting to the death of Matt Ulrich, you get exactly 72 months. And think about this album title, 72 Seasons. In A Knight's Tale, Heath Ledger plays the main character whose real name is William Thatcher, which also sums to 72 in the reduction method. And there's a few more synchronicities with this, right? Because the name Ulrich traces back to German. And the first Colts game that was played after the death of Matt Ulrich, well, after it made news anyway, was in Germany. That's right, the Indianapolis Colts defeated the New England Patriots yesterday morning in Germany, right after the death of this guy with the German last name. We're also going to talk about how Ulrich's death is synced up to the eclipse code, as in April next year, there will be a total solar eclipse that passes directly over the city of Indianapolis, where the Colts play. In 2017, we had the Sutherland Springs shooting, which was 77 months and 3 days before that eclipse. Matt Ulrich was born 20,773 days after Kiefer Sutherland. And there's actually a strong connection here because the Canterbury Tales, Geoffrey Chaucer's work, is a collection of 24 stories. And remember, Kiefer Sutherland was the star actor of the series 24, where he played Jack Bauer. Kiefer Sutherland was born on December 21st. And December 21st is also the birthday of St. Thomas Becket, who is really one of the main characters of the book. 21st of December, Thomas Becket. And the Canterbury Tales is about a group of people trying to visit Thomas Becket. Matt Ulrich also died 11,773 days after Metallica's Black Album. Now, the number 773 is the 137th prime number. And check this out. When A Knight's Tale was released, Matt Ulrich was 7,073 days old, while Lars Ulrich was 137 days after his 37th birthday. And remember, 137 is a number that's connected to both total eclipse and eclipse, with capital letters included. The capital letter ciphers, also very significant, still using the alphabetic order, but capital letters can either be mixed in or added to the equation. So again, Matt Ulrich sharing a name with Ulrich von Liechtenstein, this famous author about knighthood. In the alphabetic order, Sir Ulrich von Liechtenstein sums to 311, and this is the next important number here. Author Geoffrey Chaucer, who wrote the Canterbury Tales, his name also equals 311. And notice how Matt Ulrich died 311 days after his birthday, which is also interesting because he was born 301 weeks and 1 day after Peyton Manning, who was the MVP of Super Bowl 41, which they both won. Manning, in fact, was born 3 years and 11 days before Heath Ledger. Now, for this album's 72 seasons, notice this release date, April 14th of 2023. Well, Super Bowl 41 is also well known for having probably the best halftime performance of all time, as the musician Prince took the stage. And what's crazy about the death of Prince is that if you measure from the date of that Super Bowl to Prince's death, you get exactly 9 years and 11 weeks. So we had this 9/11 code there. Well, on the date of the album that Metallica released earlier this year, Prince would have been 64 years and 311 days old. And again, 311, the 64th prime number. In Gematria, the name Matt Ulrich sums to 64. Reverse reduction. Ulrich also died exactly 313 weeks after the Sutherland Springs shooting, one of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history. News of his death broke 313 days after his birthday. Heath Ledger died 3,013 days before Super Bowl 41 that Matt Ulrich won. Now, 313 is another prime number, the 65th prime number. This brings us back to Prince, whose name sums to 65. Prince would currently be 65 years old, and he was also born exactly 6,500 days before Peyton Manning. And there's even more alignments here. This 3 years and 11 days from Peyton Manning to Heath Ledger, that's also 158 weeks. Well, Prince was born on the 158th day of 1958. And when Metallica released their album earlier this year, Matt Ulrich was 15,080 days old. And that, by the way, a number connected to Freemasonry, which Prince was believed to be connected to. And there's certainly some more interesting alignments here, but what I want to touch on next is the eclipse code, because there was a very curious image that was being shipped around by the media after his death. Matt Ulrich wore number 69 for the Colts, as he's shown here. And notice how he's pictured sitting at table number 33. Well, this is pretty interesting, guys, because the word eclipse in Gematria sums to 69 and 33 reduction. Following his playing career, Ulrich was the co-founder of a company called Dexafit. And notice how Dexafit has the exact same gematria as the word eclipse. 69 and 33 included in those numbers. Also summing to 69 is both Indianapolis and Colts. In fact, Indianapolis Colts has the same gematria as Eclipse, 192. Those same three digits in Latin, 192, are found in Ulrich's full name gematria, 2190 in Latin. His full name in standard gematria sums to 155, with, of course, the zero dropped, as we customarily do. 155 is also the gematria of killing in standard. And remember, killing syncing up with Lars Ulrich. He died on November 5th, one of those killing dates. Not only did news of his death break 155 days after Prince's birthday, but he also died 155 days before the total eclipse that passes over the city of Indianapolis. If you include the end date, this is also 156 days, and 156 is our major eclipse number. In Hebrew gematria, the word for eclipse equals 156, as eclipses are always separated by 1, 5, or 6 lunar phases. The number 33, 156, so does eclipse the sun, and 666 in English. But especially this 33, right? Because Dexafit and eclipse equals 33. The Super Bowl that Matt Ulrich won with the Colts was played on a date with 33 numerology, which left 330 days in the year. His coach was even born exactly 33 lunations before Prince. Coach Dungy also 3,000 days before Lars Ulrich. Now, on the date of that eclipse in Indianapolis, check out how old Lars Ulrich will be. 22,020 days. Well, that stands out because he was born 222 lunar phases before Matt Ulrich. And in English gematria, the word eclipse equals 222. In Satanic gematria, a cipher which is constructed around the number 666, you'll notice that the word eclipse sums to 314. Matt Ulrich died 314 days after Lars's birthday. News of his death broke 314 days after his own birthday. His company's name, Dexafit, also has this 314 gematria. Also notice how Dexafit sums to 120 like Eclipse. Well, Lars Ulrich has birth numerology of 120, and his name sums to 121 and the 121st prime number, whereas Dexafit sums to 121 with capital letters. So, without question, the death of NFL player Matt Ulrich highly synced up to Metallica drummer Lars Ulrich. And again, Matt died just before the Colts' next game in Germany. Matt also died a span of 704 days after the last total solar eclipse. It's actually news of his death. And in Latin, total solar eclipse equals 704 and 74. In reduction, Matthew James Ulrich, 74 and 209. Well, in Hebrew, solar eclipse equals 209. There's also a deep Freemasonry riddle, as he died on a date with 59 numerology. Freemasonry, Super Bowl 41, and Metallica, all 59. In fact, Lars Ulrich, the drummer, currently 59 years old. The word kill equals 59. And both Freemasonry and Matt Ulrich's full name sum to the 59th prime number. In regards to Prince dying 9 years and 11 weeks after the Super Bowl he performed at, also notice how his death was 19,110 days after Lars Ulrich was born. And these digits, 1911, that's the Latin value of ancient and accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry. One more sync is that both Dexafit and Eclipse have matching 39 Gematria with Masonry. Prince equals 390 in Sumerian. And the death of Matt Ulrich fell on the 309th day of the year, which also had numerology of 39. The 39th prime number is 167. Well, when he won the Super Bowl, Ulrich was 9,167 days old. Metallica's album came out 16 years and 70 days after that Super Bowl. Metallica equals 167. So does Peyton Manning and Manning, by the way, the MVP of that Super Bowl. So there's definitely a couple more things to unlock there. For instance, Prince died on a date with 41 numerology, like Super Bowl. It was Super Bowl 41 that he performed at. Also, Prince has matching 123 Gematria with death and fentanyl, which is the drug that claimed his life, reportedly. 41 equals 123 in Gematria. So does Denmark, which was the home of Lars Ulrich, born in Denmark. Also, 123 is the value of Indianapolis in ordinal, and Matt Ulrich born on a date with 123 numerology. All right, so once again, we've been talking about Batman, The Dark Knight, and next I want to point to the Jedi Knight who went to the dark side, Darth Vader, as the death of DJ Hayden is going to be synced up with him. Now, I haven't checked the news in the last few hours, so I don't know if Hayden was driving this car. I know there was some back and forth, but either way, he was one of 6 people who died in a car crash late Saturday night, Sunday morning in Houston, Texas. And what's so interesting is that DJ Hayden spent almost his entire playing career, I take that back, most of his career with the Oakland Raiders, the team that drafted him. And for those of you who have been following my work, the Oakland Raiders have been of strong focus all year. Check out Superstream 60, where I talk about the Skull and Bones riddle with the Raiders, Hunter S. Thompson, and John Madden. So it's no surprise that, we get the death of somebody, and what do you know? He's connected to the Las Vegas Raiders. This is another death connected with the ongoing 9/11 riddle. Remember, 2023 is the year of Israel's 9/11, whereas 2001 was America's 9/11. And we'll see how this syncs up very well. So, Hayden's full name in Latin Gematria has the same value as the World Trade Center, 1,590. In fact, in reverse Sumerian, the date September 11th also sums to 1,590. On the date of the 9/11 attacks, DJ Hayden was exactly 11 years and 11 weeks old. 11/11. He passed away on November 11th, or 11/11. And you may recall that the big news story last year on 11/11 was the FTX collapse. To file bankruptcy, it's Chapter 11, Title 11 of the United States Code. So here we see it again the following year. Well, if you add 11 and 11, remember the number 11, huge in 9/11. The buildings were 110 stories, destroyed on the 11th, in the 11th state, etc. 11 plus 11 equals 22, and notice how New York, New York equals 222 in ordinal. For the Raiders and Jaguars, Hayden wore number 25, which also has gematria of 222. And not only did he die exactly 22 years and 2 months after the 9/11 attacks, but his death was also 222 days after the anniversary of the World Trade Center opening in 1973. Excuse me. So he wore number 25 for the Raiders and Jaguars. Notice how his full name with his nickname equals 205 in the alphabetic order. And he died 25 lunar phases, exactly, after the Henry Ruggs crash in November of 2021. Ruggs was a wide receiver who also played for the Las Vegas Raiders at the time. And in a drunk driving crash, he killed a woman and her dog. And again, that's a story I covered in Superstream 60. The word death 25. But let's check out this name, Derek Sherrard Hayden in Gematria. Notice how this sums to 191 in ordinal, the same digits found in 9/11. And in Latin, his name sums to 910, which is just one off of 9/11. In reduction, his name is 101 and 106. Derek Sherrard, DJ Hayden, and the World Trade Center also 106. When the Raiders were founded, when he was born, the Raiders were 11,106 days old. And notice how his full name also has gematria of 116 and 119, both connected to the 9/11 code. 116 and upside down 9/11. His full name also sums to 219 ordinal. And when he died, the number 219 was in the middle of his age. Well, 219 has matching gematria with the World Trade Center in ordinal and reduction. And on 219 earlier this year, or February 19th, we had the death of actor Jansen Panettiere, who was the brother of Hayden Panettiere. Hayden Panettiere, another celebrity who shares a name with DJ Hayden. So go ahead and check out my post on the death of Jansen Panettiere and how it was connected to Jim Morrison and Matthew Perry. But another famous Hayden, as I've been tapping into here, is Hayden Christensen, who played Darth Vader. Back in 2002 is where that started. Notice how DJ Hayden was born 110 months and 9 days after Hayden Christensen. So there you go with that 119. His full name also matches Hayden Christensen, 191 and 101. 101 is also the ordinal value of Darth Vader. And remember, this all connected to the Knights code. Knights summing to 101. Darth Vader has gematria of 983, and the reason that stands out is because on screen, Darth Vader died in the year 1983 in Return of the Jedi. Later on, we'll talk about the death of actor John Patrick Ruffo, whose name also sums to 983. But what I also find interesting is how this connects to another Vader. Big Van Vader, a professional wrestler who died back in 2018. And I made a video on the death of Vader and how it connected to Darth Vader. And it's no surprise because his name, Leon Allen White, has this same 983 gematria as Darth Vader. Big Van Vader died 1,973 days before DJ Hayden. The World Trade Center opened in 1973. World Trade Center sums to 1477. And Bob Knight died 14,770 days after Darth Vader died on screen. Now that's also 2,110 weeks, which connects to the 47th Prime, Darth Vader and Raiders, both 47. But check this out. Both the World Trade Center and Twin Towers sums to 218. When Big Van Vader died, DJ Hayden was 10,218 days old. And his death was also 201 months and 8 days after 9/11. The word death equals 218, and Vader died in the year 2018. Well, now, DJ Hayden has died in the year 2023. DJ Hayden equals 223 and 322, and he died in Houston, which equals 223 and 322. The name Leon Allen White equals 223 and 1,223. Furthermore, Hayden's full name, Derek Sherrard Hayden, equals 322, which is the capital letter value of the World Trade Center. He died 138 days after his birthday with the end date, the World Trade Center. His full name, with or without his nickname, 138, Houston 138. His full name also has gematria of 770, like Houston in reverse, 77. He died exactly 707 days after the last total solar eclipse, which is also 101 weeks, and we mentioned this 101 earlier. His full name, 101, just like Darth Vader. Eclipse Sacrifice, also 101. Eclipse Sacrifice, 142. He had primary birth numerology of 142, which was also the date leaving 187 days in the year. Total Eclipse, 187, the homicide code. So this is certainly not something you would expect, right? The death of DJ Hayden connected to a pro wrestler named Vader. But when you connect the dots, it almost makes too much sense. But there's more with this death that I want to touch on. Because, again, this is all connected to the ongoing Skull and Bones riddle. That's all synced up with Yale University. Yale University just turned 322 years old here in the year 2023. And a fun little fact is that, for whatever reason, I have no idea why, but I was looking at the Cricket World Cup, and I noticed there was a game on October 9th, which was the date that Yale University turned 322 years old. And look at the score of this game. 322 to 223. I mean, holy smokes. Like I say, it's either all sports are completely rigged by the numbers, or we had it wrong with numerology to begin with, but just a fact I had to share. Now, back in Super Bowl 38, the two Skull and Bones teams of the NFL squared off. This was all synced up to the death of Hunter S. Thompson. I won't get into that. But what I do want to mention is the death of Vincent Jackson, a wide receiver for the Buccaneers who passed away in 2021, just a week after the Buccaneers won the Super Bowl that year. Recently, another Buccaneers wide receiver passed away. Mike Williams, who was a teammate of Vincent Jackson, died on September 12th, just one day after 9/11. Now, the death of DJ Hayden is actually synced up heavily with Vincent Jackson, as well as this Henry Ruggs car crash. Henry Ruggs' name sums to 74, Henry Ruggs III. DJ Hayden died a span of 740 days after Ruggs' car wreck, and 74 days before Ruggs' next birthday. In ordinal, Raiders equals 74. This number connected to the crucifixion code, Jesus, killing, cross, Messiah, all 74 in ordinal. Total solar eclipse equals 704. darkness falling over this daytime sky when he was crucified. Also notice the 202. Well, Hayden died 2,274 days after the first Great American Eclipse. And the eclipse code is significant, as I discussed in my Ruggs decode. The word eclipse is 156 in Hebrew, eclipse the sun 156 in English. When Henry Ruggs crashed, he was driving 156 miles per hour in Las Vegas. Vincent Jackson died exactly 156 weeks before the Super Bowl that's held in Las Vegas. Now, the 156th prime number is 9/11. Remember September 11th or 9/11, the destruction of the two temples? Whereas the Jewish holiday, Tisha B'Av, commemorates the destruction of the two temples. This is held on the 9th day of the 11th month, and Tisha B'Av equals 9/11 in Gematria. Vincent Jackson would have been 14,911 days old when Hayden died. In fact, Vincent Jackson was born 9 years, 9 months, 11 days after the World Trade Center opened. His name, Vincent James Jackson, has that upside-down 9/11. And when Jackson died, DJ Hayden was 11,191 days old. And now Hayden's death falls a span of 9 months and 11 days after the retirement of Tom Brady. And Tom Brady is the ultimate skull and bones quarterback. Remember, Brady began his career in New England, which is where Yale University is located, and he finished his career wearing the Buccaneers skull and bones helmet. So in English, the word eclipse equals 33, just like 33 summing to 156. Well, the Henry Ruggs crash was 33 days before the next total solar eclipse. The World Trade Center was destroyed 33 years after construction began. Twin Towers equals 330. Vincent Jackson died 33 days after his birthday. His names Vincent and James both equal 33. Vincent Jackson was also born exactly 3 years and 3 weeks before another Hayden, Nick Hayden. Now, Nick Hayden is the only other man with the last name Hayden to play in the NFL in the last decade. And I mentioned Nick Hayden because, first of all, I went to school with this guy at Arrowhead High School in Heartland, Wisconsin. I'm sure he didn't know me. He was a grade beneath me. But the reason this is really interesting is because his coach in high school, Nick Hayden, was Tom Tarasca. And I just did a video on the death of Tom Tarasca 3 weeks ago. Tarasca dying in a car crash at 71. Tarasca 71, just like car crash in Gematria. The name Tarasca even means oak, tracing back to Proto-Indo-European. And he died when he hit an oak tree. So I just thought it was interesting that, he coached Nick Hayden. That was the only NFL player he coached. And now we get the death of a DJ Hayden. The last team DJ Hayden played for was the Jacksonville Jaguars, which equals 303. And when DJ Hayden died, he was 33 years and 137 days old. And 137 is the 33rd prime number. He also died 33 days after Yale's 322nd anniversary. On top of that, his death was 149 days before the eclipse next year. And skull and bones equals 149 in ordinal. That's the 35th prime number. DJ Hayden and car crash both sum to 35. DJ Hayden also matching 71 and 145 Gematria with car crash. Again, the name Tarasca was 71, like I just mentioned. He was born 2 months and 23 days after the opening of the World Trade Center. I talked about this, DJ Hayden in Houston, both 223 and 322. And he died in Las Vegas, Nevada, which has Hebrew Gematria of 223, just like the year 2023. Vincent Jackson was 223 months old for 9/11, and he died 22 weeks and 3 days after the anniversary of 9/11. The last thing I want to mention with this story is that his death was on the date leaving 50 days in the year. The World Trade Center would currently be 50 years old. This brings us back to Brady, whose name equals 50. Remember, Brady holds the record for most touchdown passes in one season with 50. The 50th prime number is 229. DJ Hayden died 229 days before his birthday and 2 years, 209 days after Vincent Jackson. That's also 999 days. And in the 229th verse of Revelation, the number of the beast is revealed to be an upside down 999. So again, a lot to unpack. I certainly didn't want to take 45 minutes for my first two decodes, but, kind of off topic here. This is kind of the point I'm trying to make with Gematria, is that there's almost no ending to the synchronicities that we can find. And the videos I've been making lately just keep getting longer and longer and longer. And it doesn't feel like I'm reaching or digging more than I have to. It's just that there's so many things that so strongly logically connect to one another. In my last video, I touched on the fact that I myself experienced a skull and bones riddle in the death of a family member back in April. And I talked about that in Superstream 51. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the term egregore. It's not something I talk about very often on this channel. But the way I see it, to put it in computer terms, an egregore is like an operation, a function, or maybe even a virus of some sort that is acting within certain boundaries inside of a realm. And the way I see it, these are like the ghosts or the spirits that live amongst us in our reality. And I believe when we review numerology, it's not just humans. In fact, humans are actually playing a pretty small part in it. It's actually this esoteric concept representing physical manifestation in our plane. And it's all connected to, of course, astrology, astronomy, the stars, and whatnot, but obviously through the language of Gematria as well. And when I'm doing decodes on this channel, I really truly believe, after all these years, that what I'm decoding has more to do with this than it does shadowy figures at a table conspiring against mankind, because there's so many things that just don't make sense. And someone mentioned this in the comments from my last video when I talked about the Beatles and how they took a song that was almost 50 years old and finally finished it. And it's like, someone asked, well, was that the plan all along? From the 70s on, that they were going to release this song in 2023? Well, it was definitely the plan, but whose plan was it? I don't know. Just a reminder, I'm talking about Gematria here on this channel, which sums to 142. And my name equals 142. In fact, this is why I call it the Superstream, because that sums to 142. But my first name even has matching Gematria with numbers. 43, 92, 29. And then my last name matches letters, 99 and 90. And then you combine my first and last name, and it matches Gematria. And when I created this calculator, no one was looking at reverse Gematria yet. And then I came along, and now we realize that reverse Gematria is huge. Well, look at the Gematria of reverse Gematria, 1198. That's my full name. 1198. And there's so much more I could get into with my own personal numerology, but again, I like to remind people that we're living in the Matrix. That movie they made was only partially fiction. I don't know about the whole machines and Zion thing, but when it comes to us living inside of a superstructure, a creation, that's absolutely the truth about what's happening. And it's why I focus so much on things like the Eclipse Code. Because to me, that's indicative of a strong organic component. Just going to check the chat here since I kind of went off on a tangent. And I guess we're going to go a little long. We probably shouldn't go too much longer than a half hour, or an hour and a half, I should say. Yeah, no, I'm definitely not reaching. Thanks for the affirmation there. To my knowledge, there weren't any Freemasons in my family. However, after I started teaching Gematria on YouTube back in 2017 or 2018, my oldest brother, one of my half-brothers from my mom's side, he joined Freemasonry. And, he was getting into real estate at the time. So, for his sake, it has more to do with building business connections and stuff. I don't know anything about Masonry through him other than, some of the basic stuff. He's actually tried to get me into it. He says I really enjoy it and that I like it. And I'm sure there are things of it that I would enjoy. However, at this point in my life, I am taking so much great joy in doing what I'm doing and kind of figuring it out on my own, so to speak, that I would never entertain the idea of taking an oath to that degree. It just never happened. Also, I'm not much of a collaborator. I don't know if you guys realize that by now. So, next up, I want to talk about Dick Butkus's cause of death. The death of Dick Butkus was one of the most amazing numerical alignments that I've ever seen in sports and celebrity deaths. And we'll touch on that as well, but what I want to focus on is why November 9th was the date that we learned about Dick's cause of death. And it's being reported that he died of a stroke, which has also been quoted as a cerebrovascular accident. A very strange term, an accident for a stroke. Why would they call it that? Well, we'll look at the Gematria and explain why, I believe. On the date of this news, November 9th, Dick Butkus would have been 335 days after his birthday, and that's the Latin value of stroke. In the alphabetic order, the word stroke equals 88, and 88 is 8 times 11. Well, on the same date as that story, Dick Butkus would have been exactly 80 years and 11 months old. On that same date of the news story, Mike Ditka, legendary Bears head coach, would have been 30,703 days old. That stands out because Mike Ditka was born 3 years, 7 weeks, and 3 days, or exactly 37 months and 3 weeks before Dick Butkus. The number 373 is the 74th prime number, and in the reverse alphabetic order, stroke sums to 74. Mike Ditka was also born exactly 164 weeks before Dick Butkus. This was a number I talked about in my first video. The name Mike Ditka sums to 164. Well, the 164th prime number is 971. And when we learned of his cause of death, Dick Butkus would have been exactly 971 months old. When Dick Butkus passed away, Mike Ditka would have been exactly 1,007 months and 17 days old. In standard Gematria, Richard Marvin Butkus equals 1717. Now, this is interesting because Freemasonry was founded in the year 1717. Freemasonry has Latin Gematria of 787. Now, back in October, the same day that Dick Butkus died on a Thursday, the Chicago Bears, his old team, went to Washington to play the Commanders. And in that game, they picked up their 787th all-time victory. The name Richard Butkus equals 787 in Latin. Now you'll see that the Bears also had 628 losses at that time. Well, in the same cipher, Dick Butkus equals 628. And they beat the Commanders, who were looking for their 628th victory of all time. So that is indeed some very fascinating gematria. Dick Butkus died on October 5th, for the record, which was the birthday of former Chicago DJ Herb Kent. And the Bears' leading receiver is DJ Moore, and their lead running back is Khalil Herbert. And consider this, right? A DJ, and we just had the death of DJ Hayden. He died 2 days after Dick Butkus' cause of death was revealed. And again, these are all riddles I mentioned in my video on Dick Butkus, which, of course, you can find on my channel. As far as the word stroke summing to 88, Dick Butkus died at his home in California, which equals 88. And he was born in Chicago. He also played college football in Illinois, and then he played for the Bears. And Chicago sits right along the 88th meridian. In reduction, both Richard Marvin Butkus and Richard Butkus equals 88. He was 80 years old. 80 equals 88. The Bears head coach currently is named Eberflus. His name equals 88. Bears founder George Halas died at the age of 88. The word radio equals 88. Herb Kent was a Guinness World Record holder for being on the air for the longest amount of time. Longest career as a radio presenter, DJ. Finally, cerebrovascular accident has gematria of 105. And that's like the date that Dick Butkus died, October 5th, 10-5. And remember, it was in Chicago, Illinois, which is 10:05 in Fibonacci. All right, so next up, I want to talk about the move of Craig Counsell, former manager of the Milwaukee Brewers, betraying the Brewers, traveling south, and now taking a job as the Cubs manager. Now, this story is also deeply embedded with a major 9/11 riddle. Craig Counsell played on the Arizona Diamondbacks in the year 2001. In fact, Counsell was on base when the Arizona Diamondbacks beat the New York Yankees in the World Series in 2001. My last Super Stream explained the World Series riddle this year, which was completely connected to the 9/11 attacks. So now we have Craig Counsell involved in a major 9/11 riddle. He moved to the Cubs on November 6th, which is an upside-down 9/11 date. And now many of the fans in my neck of the woods are calling him a traitor. And you got to appreciate how the word traitor has matching gematria with Craig Counsell and Craig John Counsell, his full name. So let's bust out our trusty PowerPoint so you guys can see these alignments a little better. Craig's full name, Craig John Counsell, has gematria of 1226 in Latin and 93 in reverse reduction. Now this stood out because back in the year 1993, the World Trade Center was bombed on 2/26. So here we have these same digits, 226 and 93, with Craig John Counsell. But check this out. Not only did the World Trade Center open a span of 226 days after Craig's birthday, but on the date of the bombing, 2/26/93, he was 22 years and 6 months old and 8,226 days old. In gematria, the word sacrifice, also 226 in standard. Now this year, November 9th, another 9/11 date, was 22 years and 60 days after the 9/11 attacks. That was just 3 days after Craig was hired. Craig was hired 11,211 days after the World Trade Center bombing. And, I just thought this was an interesting number. You have two 11s divided by a 2. The World Trade Center bombing was 3,119 days before 9/11. 3,119 is the 444th prime number. Craig Counsell was the manager of the Milwaukee Brewers for exactly 444 weeks. In fact, the owner of the Brewers, Mark Attanasio, had 3 4s in his age when Counsell went to the Cubs. The name Craig John Counsell sums to 1116, very similar to this 9/11 code. Brewers owner Mark Attanasio was born a span of exactly 1,016 weeks before the Cubs manager David Ross. Now, there is a riddle for David Ross to end up coming to the Brewers as the manager. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. But the numerology is interesting nonetheless. Now, the number 1109 is the 186th prime number, and Craig John Counsell sums to 186 in ordinal. Attanasio was 186 months old when the World Trade Center opened. But notice how Craig Counsell was the manager of the Brewers for 8 years, 186 days. David Ross was hired by the Cubs 1,086 days after he and the Cubs won the World Series. Craig Counsell won a total of 707 games during his time in Milwaukee. The name Craig Counsell equals 77. And he was hired by the Cubs 77 days after his birthday. September 11th and World Trade Center both equal 77. This happened on a date with 60 numerology. This meant David Ross lost his job. David Ross equals 60. So does I-94. And when we talk about the Brewers and Cubs, we're essentially talking about the I-94 rivalry, which I thought existed in Wikipedia, but apparently doesn't. I-94, the interstate that separates the two cities. So Craig Counsell was the manager of the Brewers for 3,109 days. This is almost identical to David Ross's birthday, March 19th, or 319. Notice how these two managers were born 2,402 days apart. Milwaukee Brewers has double gematria of 242. Now, the next time the Brewers play the Cubs, it's on the date leaving 242 days in the year. The name Counsell has ordinal gematria of 101. And he was moved to the Cubs 11 weeks after his birthday exactly. Again, 11, a huge 9/11 number. The World Trade Center and Twin Towers both summing to 218 in gematria. Craig Counsell, born on the 21st of August, or 21/8. When he was hired by the Brewers, it was 218 days after the owner's birthday. The owner was also 21,037 days old. And that reminds us of the 322nd prime number, 2137. 322, the gematria of both the World Trade Center and Cubs Brewers. For the record, November 9th was 1,477 days after David Ross was hired, and World Trade Center equals 1,477. World Trade Center bombing has matching gematria with World Trade Center, 247. And Craig Counsell, who has all these insane alignments with the bombing, was hired by the Cubs during Brown Lunation 1247. So every new moon has been numbered since 1923. Today is the first day of Lunation 1248. So I would definitely expect some more celebrity deaths soon. Human Sacrifice 248. But yeah, this happened during 1247. Also, there's an interesting moon landing riddle here as well that I want to touch on. First, 9/11 is the 156th prime number. Twin Towers equals 156. David Ross was hired by the Cubs when he was 15,560 days old. It was also the first day of the 156th week since the Cubs won the World Series. Both I-94 and 33 summed to 156. And when Counsell went to the Cubs, it was exactly 1,156 weeks after 9/11. Both 666 and 666 equal 156. And the name David Ross equals 666. And you won't find too many people coded with the number 666 more than David Ross. The name David Wade Ross sums to 144, like 666 in Latin. Remember, the number 144 is mentioned 4 times in the book of Revelation. 666 sums to 1197 also. And look at the multiplicative birth numerology for David Ross, 11,907. And when he was hired by the Cubs, it was during Brown Lunation, 1197. When you write out Cubs Brewers, you get another 1197. If you search for the numbers 666 in pi, you won't find them until the 2,440th digit. While the name David Wade Ross, using square numbers, equals 2,440. And if you multiply 6 times 6 times 6, you get 216. Well, in 2016, David Ross won the World Series with the Cubs. And this all led to the most bizarre home run celebration I've ever seen, where he just bumped dicks with everyone on the Cubs. Look at this. 2 dick bumps. 3 dick bumps. Where's the third? There's 3. 4. 5. 6. I think there was a 7th right there. Oh, big dick bump. Did you see that guy wind up? Look at him. Oh, boom! I mean, what are these guys doing? Now, notice the score of the game, right? This was Chicago's 6th run in the 6th inning. Cleveland only had 3 runs, but if you add the 3 from the pitch count, you get another 6. And again, this was the home run David Ross hit in the World Series in 2016. So, is it just rigged? I don't know. I think these guys know something. Could it be like sex magic? Is that what they're alluding to? I don't know. It's too bizarre for me to even wrap my head around. Craig Counsell got hired by the Cubs 2 months and 16 days after his birthday. It was also 216 days after the anniversary of the World Trade Center. And the Brewers currently have 216 wins over the Cubs. The name Craig John Counsell matches 666 in Gematria. He's 4,710 days younger than the Brewers' owner, 666 in Revelation, 471. As far as this moon landing riddle, a few years ago, they changed the time of the moon landing. I don't know if you know that, but it used to be 2018 UTC, and now they've changed it to 2017. And they changed it after I started teaching numerology, right? Because moon equals 218, like Craig Counsell's birthday. Counsell was also born in 1970, which syncs up with moon, 197 in Satanic. Well, Craig Counsell has primary birth numerology of 118, and he grew up in Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin. Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin, and Wisconsin, both 118. Moon landing equals 118 in 53. Apollo 11, 53. Counsell is currently 53 years old. The next Brewers-Cubs game on 5/3. The number 666 equals 256 in Latin. And man first stepped on the moon at 256 UTC, if you want to believe it. Well, when the Cubs hired Craig Counsell, it was 2,560 days after they won the World Series. When Counsell was hired by the Brewers, it was 256 days after his birthday. And now the next Brewers and Cubs game will also be 256 days after his birthday with the end date. All right, we got one more story to unpack here. We're going to talk about the death of actor Johnny Ruffo, who was best known as a star of X Factor Australia, where he was a runner-up. But more recently, he starred in the soap opera Home and Away. As we see here, Home and Away, where he played a character named Chris Harrington. Now, very early on in this video, I mentioned Kiefer Sutherland and how he was synced to the death of Matt Ulrich. Well, Kiefer Sutherland has one of these ridiculous, probably Masonic names. I mean, who gives their kids 7 names, right? It's so stupid. But what I want to point out is in Gematria, how this name sums to 1119. Remember, he shares a December 21st birthday with Saint Thomas Becket. December 21st. And look what year Becket was born in, 1119. Well, one of Kiefer Sutherland's middle names is Rufus. And the name Rufus is the basis of Ruffo. That's where the name Ruffo comes from. So now we get the death of this actor, Johnny Ruffo. And this was actually the catalyst for one of my rare sports bets. Now, I always reiterate, this is not a sports betting channel. I don't typically talk about this because I don't really like gambling, right? And there's a lot of people on YouTube, or at least a few people, who are using numerology for gambling in a completely wrong and misleading manner. I will be one of the first people to tell you, you can win money on sports with numerology, but it's not in the way that many people think. So in the last 2 years, I've made 10 bets, and I've won 9 of them. And this was one of them. Because this was connected to the death, or to a former 49ers executive named Albert J. Ruffo. Now, I can't explain how I figure these things out because sometimes you just got to search for the name, right? Ruffo. And most of these people are Italian, but there's a couple Americans in here. And one that stood out was Albert J. Ruffo, because this was a politician who served as an executive and founder of the San Francisco 49ers, a major sports team. So it kind of dawned on me, like, could there be a riddle with the 49ers game this week with the death of Johnny Ruffo? Now, there was another man named John Ruffo who is currently on the FBI's most wanted list. This guy embezzled like $350 million or something, and he got away with it. So a lot of people would probably call this guy a hero. But anyway, we're not so much focused on him as we are this Albert Ruffo. And his middle name was Jay. This could be John. Who knows? The name John Ruffo equals 113, right? And when you look up the San Francisco 49ers, they entered yesterday's game with 617 wins. And 617 is the 113th prime number. So I saw this and I'm like, man, there might be a riddle here, right? So Johnny Ruffo was on a show called Home and Away. And I saw this and I'm like, wait a minute. Football teams play home and away games, right? So this weekend, the San Francisco 49ers played the Jacksonville Jaguars. And if you go to StatMuse and ask StatMuse, what is the Jacksonville Jaguars' record at home? Because this was a home game for the Jaguars. And the San Francisco 49ers just gave Jacksonville their 113th home loss. So I looked at this the other day and I saw 112, and I put all the money in my betting account on this game. And it was weird because the 49ers lost 3 in a row. The Jaguars won 5 in a row. The Jaguars were at home, but the 49ers were still favored. Now, granted, they were healthier, I guess. But still, I mean, it looks like you should bet for the Jaguars because of the recent games, but really this was pointing to the Niners the whole time. And sure enough, the Niners blew them out yesterday. Now, if you as a viewer are asking, well, why don't you do this ahead of time? I could have won money from that ahead of time. Forget it. I'm not going to be doing sports decodes before these things happen, because we saw how this happens with other Gematria channels. You know, once you figure out what's going on and once you start sensing the code and make it public, then it's not gonna pan out the way that you want after a long time. So again, like, I don't put money on sports every week, not even every month, but once in a great while, you see a riddle like this, and it just hits you like, this is definitely going to happen. Now, again, I throw a caveat out there because I did lose one of my bets using this methodology over the last couple of years, so I could have very well put all my money in there and lost it, and I would feel like an idiot. And for people who, you know, use numerology to bet on sports and lose, well, you probably feel like an idiot after it's over, don't you? So just be careful, be responsible, don't be an idiot, and don't mislead people, because that'll come back to bite you as well. So check this out. The death of Johnny Ruffo is super, super synced to Albert Ruffo. And we're going to go to the slides to demonstrate. 49ers executive Albert J. Ruffo has Gematria of 1150 in Latin. John Ruffo, the actor, was born 115 days before Albert's birthday. Well, when Ruffo died, Albert Ruffo would have been 115 years old. And remember the word killing, double Gematria of 115. Now, John Ruffo would have also died 133 days after Albert Ruffo's birthday. And in the same cipher, John Patrick Ruffo equals 1303. And when Johnny Ruffo died, he was 13,030 days old. This alignment, like, if you call this a coincidence, you literally have no brain cells. Like, this is remarkable. And this is why I saw this as a potential clue, because these alignments are so strong. 1303 is the 213th prime number. 213. And when you look at the date that Albert Ruffo died, February 10th of 03, 2103. The word coronavirus also equals 1303. And Johnny Ruffo died exactly 191 weeks after the coronavirus was declared a national emergency on 1303, or the 13th of March. In the alphabetic order, his full name, John Patrick Ruffo, equals 191. This was also a number significant to that, as Society of Jesus and total solar eclipse equals 191. Remember, the vaccine was made, approval of the vaccine was announced on December 14th of 2020, which was the same date as a total solar eclipse over Argentina. Argentina, home to Pope Francis, the first Jesuit pope. And remember, the corona of the sun is the upper atmosphere, which is only visible during a total solar eclipse. So coronavirus and the eclipse code synced like none other. Johnny Ruffo died 1,340 days after the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic. In standard Gematria, Johnny Ruffo equals 1340. 134 is also the ordinal value of both solar eclipse and Albert J. Ruffo, 134. In Latin, solar eclipse equals 433. Well, on the date of the next total solar eclipse in April next year, Johnny Ruffo would have been exactly 433 months old. If you include the end date, Ruffo was 13,031 days old when he died. And this is really the ultimate eclipse number, something I've been blogging about and talking about for many years. 1331, the ultimate to this eclipse code. Our entire language, the Latin cipher, completely constructed around this number. Well, think about how Corona has this matching 224 Gematria with Anthony Stephen Fauci, who was the expert that the New World Order marched out in front of us, telling us all to stay in our homes. Cover your face, you stupid sheep. That's what this jackass was saying. Well, the number 224 is very relevant here because when Albert J. Ruffo died, he was a span of 224 days after his 94th birthday. Well, 94, that's the gematria of coronavirus pandemic, 94. But the number 224 is also the gematria of John Ruffo with capital letters. On the series Home and Away, Ruffo played a character named Chris Harrington, whose name sums to 224 in reverse. And when Ruffo died, it was a span of 224 days after the anniversary of Chris Harrington's debut on Home and Away. You'll notice that Albert J. Ruffo is a perfect base match with solar eclipse. In Hebrew, solar eclipse is 209, and Ruffo died 20 years and 9 months exactly after Albert J. Ruffo. There's one other thing I want to point out about this span. It was, I think, 249 months. Now, this 249 stood out because I actually mentioned this number in one of my other posts. Maybe it was just this one. But in Latin gematria, the phrase car accident equals 249. And remember, we had the car accident with DJ Hayden. Back in 1963, JFK was killed while he was in a car. And the JFK assassination was completely coded to Mercury. Notice how November 11th was exactly 249 mercurial years after the JFK assassination. Albert J. Ruffo was from Tacoma, Washington, which is 249 as well. COVID-19 pandemic, 249. The name John Patrick Ruffo also equals 88. And he died 8 months and 8 days after Albert Ruffo's birthday. Albert Ruffo was once the mayor of San Jose, California, which equals 880. California, 88. Ruffo died 88 lunar phases after his last appearance on Home and Away. As far as this 88, this was another number connected to the death of another actor from Home and Away, Ben Unwin, who died back in 2019. He was also a star in this same soap opera, Home and Away. John Patrick Ruffo was born in the year 88, and his death was 88 days after the birthday of Ben Unwin. In fact, Ben Unwin would have also been 16,888 days old. And we also learned that Ruffo died of brain cancer. Brain cancer equals 88 in Gematria. Just trying to figure out where to go next. There's so much information to unpack as usual. Ruffo's first appearance on the soap opera was on a date with 38 numerology. And he was also born on 3/8, March 8th. This is part of the death code, as the word death equals 38 and 118. And he had birth numerology of 118, like homicide. Death also equals 25, and he was 25 years and 25 days old for his first appearance on the show. Death equals 64. He died on a date with 64 numerology. Also, death equals 213, and we mentioned this in connection with Albert J. Ruffo, who died with the 213 date. The 213th prime connecting to his Latin gematria and his age when he died. Let's talk about the number 33, though, because Johnny Ruffo has Latin gematria of 1480. And notice how 33 sums to 148, just like ritual sacrifice. Also, ritual human sacrifice matches 33 in Latin extended. Well, the 33rd prime number is 137. Remember, total eclipse and eclipse, both 33 and 137. COVID-19 pandemic, 137. Corona, 33. Well, when he died, he was 1,307 weeks old. The name Ruffo, 137. Chris equals 33. Home and Away equals 1370. Actually, that was his age when he debuted, not when he died. 33 also equals 156. And his first appearance on the series happened when he was 300 months, 3 weeks, 3 days old. He was also 9,156 days old. Numbers connected to the sacrifice code, 911 and 156. He debuted during Brown Lunation 11/16. And then he died a span of 1 month and 19 days after the anniversary of his final appearance. His death was also a span of 119 days before his next birthday. And he first debuted 10 years and 19 days before the eclipse that touched Australia, his home nation. He was born in Balcata, which equals 156 and 119. No way, they changed his birth city to Perth. That's crazy. You know, if you look at this from a couple days ago, it said Balcata. And then I add that to my post, and then they change it to Perth. I don't know. Maybe I'm the crazy one. The date he died had a lot of matching numerology with Kill, 28, 64, and 44. His death was also exactly 44 months after the coronavirus pandemic. The word kill equals 28, 64, and 44. Kill also equals 244 in Latin, just like the number 19 in Latin. And if you measure from the deaths of these two home and away actors, you get the 244th prime number of days. Finally, the name Ruffo has matching gematria with pi, circles, and eclipse through the number 69. Pi is 3.14, and Ruffo died on the 314th day of the year, connecting to eclipse. The name Johnny Ruffo, 204, and he died 204 days after the eclipse in Australia, which was on the 20th of April, or 20/4. All right. So when I feel like I've decoded too much, then I know it's probably time to wrap things up. But just to touch on what I was saying earlier about Gematria and what's going on, again, I've kind of made it a point to take a step back and show the larger picture of these decodes. You know, it's one thing to point out like a match between the date numerology and someone's name. But when you look at the astrological components, how it relates to other people with the same name, I mean, we looked at this with Ulrich, with Hayden. There's something much more deeply mystical going on. And when putting this superstream together, I realized there's no perfect way to share this information. And that's what I've been kind of striving to do this whole time, is to bring everything together in the most digestible, understandable way that makes sense to the viewer, so that they understand that the reality we live in is not what it is portrayed to us by our superiors and authority figures in this world. And the fact that my channel has been literally deleted off the internet, my original YouTube channel, before they went ahead and changed the algorithm, should show people that they really do care who knows about this, because knowing the truth about the world you live in is empowering. People say, well, how is it empowering to know we live in some type of matrix or superstructure? Well, it's because you wouldn't be here if there wasn't a purpose for it. And that goes for everyone listening, everyone who's ever lived, essentially. And a lot of people, they never realize their purpose. And perhaps that's why some people meet their death sooner than others. Because they went down the wrong path, They'd accepted too many demons. And next thing you know, they had to do a reset or something to that effect. And I'll never pretend to understand the mystical truths about our world, but it is interesting to think about these things, you know. And, you know, I've been doing this we're going on 7 years now. My first Gematria video was December of 2016. So it'll be 7 years coming up pretty soon here. And, I can't do this forever, I guess, is what I'm saying. I definitely want to make videos about Gematria and make media content to show this, because I really think that, you know, there is a good way to do it and to help wake people up. But these long-form videos that I'm making, it's starting to drive me a little nuts, in the sense that I can't share this information in the perfect way. And this machine, this matrix, it just keeps going. Like next week, there will be another video I can make. Maybe about the deaths of other celebrities, about a sports game, I don't know. But it'll never be perfect. So what I'm going to be doing in the next year here is taking a little bit of a step back from YouTube. I want to do two main things. First of all, I need to update the website. We launched about a year ago for memberships, and now there's ads and everything. And the website is not yet to where I want it to be. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I just simply don't like coding as much as I like decoding. I also suck at multitasking. So it's hard for me to, you know, code for half the day and then go decode something. Like, I need to have a primary focus. So there's things on the website that need improvement that I will be working on in the near future. Also, I'm going to be writing a book very soon. I feel like my story with Gematria, my learning experience with this, has almost come full circle now, and that I have enough knowledge in my past that it's worth sharing in the form of a book. And that book will serve two purposes: both kind of give people the basics on numerology to help better understand what I'm doing in these videos and in my decodes, but also my personal story as I woke up to this matrix that we live in. Remember, I came into this complete 100% on the side of conspiracy theory. As in, like, all of these athletes are actually acting on the field. Every single play is a script. You know, this guy's running to X yard line with this amount of time on the clock. In no way do I believe that things are scripted to that degree still. And I know that pisses a lot of people off who think that, you know, everything's all staged, everything's all rigged. It would be so much harder to do that than to just understand that, you know, especially when you look at your own life and realize, wait a minute, I'm part of this too. I'm connected to what's happening. Nobody's rigging my life that I can see, so how is this possible? And that's what opens your eyes to the greater side of reality, the other side of reality that I like to call it. So I really want to get the book out because it'll help explain, again, the basics of things like the Eclipse code, the ciphers I use, how I go about decoding, but also exploring my numerical connections to the world, because it's so mind-bending. Like, you know, I never planned on quitting my job and doing things like this full-time when I started this. For years, I just assumed it would be a side thing. And it was actually a numerical alignment my birthday had with the Eclipse code that led me to quit my job. I was like, you know what? These are signs. And maybe my efforts are better spent on this topic. Because I can hold a job and work somewhere, but all I'm doing is enriching myself. Nothing I'm doing at that job is helping enrich humanity with anything. And, you know, I've been told growing up that I had a gift for writing, so it would be remiss for me to ignore that and not share my experience with people who can benefit from it. And maybe it's a very small percentage of people in the world who will benefit, but as long as it's some people, because I look back and think, how beneficial would it be if, you know, when I was 16 and I first found God, when I accepted what everyone calls the Holy Spirit, at that time, if someone was also there to kind of teach me a little bit about this, not everything, but just to kind of show, hey, the world around you is indeed a spiritual realm, a spiritual multiplex, then I wouldn't have strayed so far from God in my 20s, which is what I did. You know, I started this work when I was like 30. which, hey, I'm not saying, this should be a topic for all young people. I actually think there's a pretty good reason that the Jewish mystics held this knowledge from anybody who was under the age of 40. But in the type of world we live in with so many lies, with a media that's so full of shit, I think it's worth it to show people, younger people, a little bit more about this world. So just checking the chat again. I'm sorry, I don't commonly go in the chat when I do these videos. It's just not something I love to do so much. Teaching is addicting. There's something to be said for making videos and getting positive feedback from people that kind of keeps me going a little bit. It's a little bit scary for me to sit down and write a book, right? Because you're spending hours of your day in your own head by yourself, not getting that feedback. And when I don't have another job right now, that is something I kind of like. So that's part of it. Yeah, I noticed 33 people were watching for a very long time there. That's pretty funny. As far as, what's organic and what's not, you cannot tell unless you're part of the thing. And to be honest, this is kind of what woke me up to a lot of the bullshit conspiracy stuff on the internet. And there is a lot of it out there. Now, yes, conspiracies are real. Yes, there is a group of people controlling the world, the banking system, large world governments, but they're not as powerful as people think. And when I put my name out there, I made the calculator, I started teaching this knowledge, I thought, well, I can't be a bad guy here. All I'm doing is giving people knowledge and building stuff for them for free. Well, at the time it was free, right? And it still is free. And then people on the internet started to say I was a shill. I started to read these comments like, oh, there's this fake beef now going on between Derek and Zach. And I started to think like, man, there's actually people who think I'm a shill. And then you start realizing, well, how many other things are these people on the internet wrong about? And there's a lot of crazy conspiracy theories out there that are designed specifically to make conspiracy look stupid. So I've had to question everything in my growth, and I've went down many rabbit holes, but I'd like to think I kind of came out of it a little bit smarter, and I'm still reviewing knowledge, I'm still learning, still growing in this world, but again, it's really when you put yourself in the mix and you start to see how things still line up by the numbers, Even if the NFL or NBA wasn't rigged, you would still see things that you could decode by the numbers. I have no doubt about that. And I think I've proven that with some of the stranger sports decodes I've done in the past. All right, so I think I'm done ranting and rambling. I've been doing a little bit more of this lately, and I like to see myself as an informational output channel, right? Like, here's the info. You guys can decide what to believe and think about it. But with all the time and focus and energy I put into this study in 7 years, I think it's worth it to at least throw my opinions out there, my ideas, my perceptions, because we can only get closer to the truth if we're all doing it together, right? Okay. So with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap the stream up there. If you're already a member of the website, thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't thank you enough to make this possible. It helps support the powerful servers that we're going to be using more and more throughout the next year. A lot of new features I want to add. With more details, I'll make that public when it happens. And again, I'll be doing these videos through the end of the year at the pace that I'm currently doing them at. But after that, there's going to be a slowdown. I hope you guys understand that there's, some bigger things I want to do as well. And yeah, thanks for that last comment, Occult Fan. It's true, man. I can show you the numerology all I want, but really you got to see the truth for yourself. You have to experience it. And those experiences are what help unlock new levels of consciousness and awareness in this world. I can throw you a rope, I can build you a ladder, but I can't necessarily get you there. So with that being said, peace, love, God bless. Talk to you next time.
See ya.